my name's Tess Wallace, and I was placed in Albacete.
I love the accent.
Thank you.
My name is Katianna Higgins, and I was placed in Badajoz.
Cool. And do you both want to tell me a little bit about what your families were like, what your community was like, and your school?
I had about 128,000 people in my town, which is pretty big for Spain. It was the capital of like my province. So yeah, it was a pretty big town, which I wasn't really expecting. My school was small. I had probably 40 people in my grade. My school right now, I have about 620 people in my grade. There I only had 40. And so each class had maybe 15, 20 people in it. The family that I lived with, they have 3 kids. The oldest one is a girl named Paula. She lives in Scotland currently. So I met her once. She came like for a week while I was there because she wanted to meet me, but she didn't live with us. She had a younger brother named Liam, who was 22. He went to college in Valencia, but during my time there, he ended up wanting to switch to go to school in Scotland. So he actually lived with me, which we weren't really expecting, which was really fun. I loved having an older brother because I never really had one before. And I was like, oh, this is fun. Like I've always wanted like an experience like that. The third sibling was a boy. His name was Luis. He was 16 years old. We were literally 3 months apart. I'm older. Not that matters, but most of the time, I think I only lived with Luis for about a month, and then a month into my stay, Liam came and lived with us. So it was usually 5 of us that were all living in the house. And I had a dog. I had a dog.
Yes, that sounds awesome. All of it. What about you, Katianna?
My town was a lot different. It was kind of like opposite of Tess's, you could say, because I lived in a very small town. It had between 30,000 people. It was definitely very agricultural. Although my town was smaller, my school was bigger. There was like only a couple schools for the whole town. I mean, it still wasn't a very big school. I probably had like 150 people to my grade, but it was bigger than maybe 40. And then my host family, my trip was also very family oriented. I had 4 host siblings and my 2 parents, and the 8 of us or 7 of us lived in a piso, like an apartment. So I shared a room with my older sister, and we got really close. We got along really well. And then I had a brother who was my same age, so we were both 15 when we were there. I went to school with him, so we got along super well also, and it was cool to have somebody my age. Then I had 2 younger siblings. My younger sister was 11 and my younger brother was 8. That was also pretty cool. I liked having like brothers because I've never had brothers like at all, so that was a really interesting experience.
I have a question. Were either of your parents freaked out that you were with boys your same age?
No, I mean, yeah, my parents were just kind of like, they trust, both of our parents were just like,
yeah. I'm just curious because that's something that a lot of parents will say absolutely no, like other siblings of the opposite gender of the same age.
Yeah, I remember when I first got my placement, I went to a family party with like family friends of ours, and we told them about it, and my family friends' parents were actually way more concerned about it. God, like what's happening? They can't do that. That should not be appropriate. And I think that, I mean, even when I got to Spain, my host family wasn't necessarily concerned about it, but it was for sure something that we were like, okay, like, especially because we were the only people in the house at sometimes, like, because we had no other siblings yet until Liam came. So they were like, oh, you know, just like, we're not saying that this is something you guys would do, but just you have to understand that, like, that's not okay. And it's.
So they sat you down and talked about it?
No, I went on a hike with my parents on my first weekend, and they were like, so just so you know, like, this isn't something that we're accusing you of, but this is something that, like, we can see being something just because, like.
Interesting.
Just because of the age and, like.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's good they talked to you about it.
I feel like my host family was more concerned than my own parents as well. They never directly talked to me about anything because I think they kind of realized, like, I got along with my sister really well, and I only ever really engaged with my host brother at school. But I think they talked to him about it because sometimes they would, like, I don't know, I just felt like they would kind of take him away and, like, say something, and then he would come back and, like, not talk to me, and I'd be like, okay. So I think they were probably more concerned than my parents were, but it was never a big issue. That was, like, in the first couple weeks, and then after that, everything just kind of normaled out, and they were like, okay, this is what it is, and nobody had any concerns.
Right. It's just like having a brother.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, to me, it was just like when I got there, I was learning all of these new things. And so I, of course, followed my host brother because I was like, okay, like, he's the same age as me. Like, so I hung out with him and his friends sometimes, like, especially the first 2 to 3 weeks, I would say, like, I was following and was with him 98% of the time. And then after that, I, like, ended up branching away and, like, I probably hung out with him less than anyone. But
interesting, yeah.
I just, like, I could tell that the first couple of weeks, because I was just, like, following him around and, like, wanting to, like, understand everything and, like, kind of maybe going through that culture shock. I follow him, and that is what I think they, like, picked up on, but it wasn't anything, like, you know, they probably were just doing it as a safety precaution or something.
Right. Well, if there's anything else about that or anything else that you think would be important for other people to know, jump in, even if it's not a question. Can each of you share maybe overall highlights of your trip, like things that you will always remember, or with people say, name your top 5 experiences? Those are the things you automatically mention.
Towards the very end of my stay, I went to Malaga with just my host sister and my host dad. And usually when we would go on trips, it would be like the whole family. Sometimes it could get chaotic. Sometimes it could be kind of a lot to handle. But my older sister is going to be going to college in Malaga this next year. And just the 2 of them were going to go look at the college and have her orientation. But since, like, I was there and they wanted me to experience more parts of Spain, I got to go.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Malaga is probably, like, my favorite place in Spain that I went to, because I love, like, the ocean, and I just loved the whole vibe of Malaga. I don't know, just how everything is so old. There's all the buildings right on the water, and it was just, like, a really cool thing to experience. And then my host dad's brother lived there, so I got to stay in, like, an actual house there instead of a hotel. So it was just, like, a really neat experience. We were only there for a couple days, so I didn't do a lot of, like, sightseeing, but we walked around, like, the center and, like, the plaza, and we went to the beach, and we went and had dinner, and it was just, like, a really chill, fun experience. I got to just be with my host sister by ourselves. So that was really cool and really fun. And then I think, like, once I started making friends at school, going out with them was, like, a different and really cool experience as well, because the way that people hang out in Spain, or even just in my town, is a lot different than what people might do, like, where I live. So we would, like, go and just walk around for hours, whereas here we're like, we don't do that. It was interesting to see how there's so many different ways to, like, hang out with people, and that's just, like, what they're used to, because there's not much to do in my small town.
What would you say to people who would hear that and say, that sounds so boring? Why did you do that all the time?
It might sound boring. I mean, I guess it could sound boring, but when you're there, and, like, even if it's just my small town, there's so much to take in. Like, there's so many different things about a small town in Spain than, like, my town that I live in would be considered a small town. But it's really cool just to, like, get to know people and, like, speak in Spanish and, like, improve the conversation and, like, learn all about the people. They also, like, go out at night, like, instead of in the day. Like, nightlife is more. So we would go out late at night and just walk around, not doing anything. It would be fun. Like, it wouldn't be just boring, randomly walking around. When you're there, it feels different than, like, if you were to think about it.
And did you get close to specific people in the group that you would hang out with?
Yeah, I had one of my friends, his name was Gonzalo, and he spoke really well, like, really good English, which helped me a lot. I got along with him really well, and, like, I have a whole group chat with all of my friends from Spain, and they all loved me. Like, I was, like, La Americana, and along really well. So we have, like, this whole big group chat on Instagram where I talk to them all the time, and, like, they'll talk about the things that they're going to be doing together, and I'll be like, oh, like, nah. I still talk to a lot of them, but I think the person I was probably closest to in Spain was my host sister, because we weren't too far apart in age, and we got along really well. We were together a lot of the time. So she was probably the person that I was closest to while I was there. They all surprised me when I went away. They had, like, a Spanish flag. That was a good experience.
Did you cry?
No, I didn't.
Okay. I would have.
I cried, like, once I had already left.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, eh.
I would say one of the most memorable experiences for me was during Semana Santa, which is the Easter there. We ended up going to France, which I thought was so fun because I'd never been to France, and it always had been something that I'd wanted to do. And we found this, like, little campsite kind of, but it was like glamping. It was like high class camping. we lived in like it was like a cabin kind of, but really small. There was 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and like a common area. That was it. So it was like a college dorm kind of, but like in a house thing. It was so fun because for that whole week, we were just looking at French towns, going on the French countryside, tasting new foods, and just all hanging out. We went with like family friends of theirs, and they had a girl who was a couple years younger than me, but she was always fun to hang out with, and they loved to practice their English. And I'd like to just sit out on the patio and read, or like they always did this like barbecue, and they would barbecue me like vegetarian things because I'm a vegetarian, and they would be like,
right,
oh, like take this, and it was really fun. So that was one of my favorite experiences.
That sounds amazing.
No, it was so.
That sounds like a dream.
I got back and my friends were like, "Oh, like the rich girl goes to France." I was like, I'm with my host family. Like it was all them. Another one of my favorite experiences was we met in Seville. We did like a trip together in Seville.
Yes.
We hung out together for the weekend. It was such a long train ride, but it was fun. It was like, I took a train for like 6 hours to get there. I was like, oh my God. But it was fun. We had a lot of fun.
A day shopping.
Yeah, we spent a day shopping because like I really hadn't bought anything yet because I was like, like I'll just put it off. I'll buy things eventually. And then I was like literally 3/4 of the way through the trip and I was like, I haven't bought any clothes and like I need to get in with the Spanish fashion, you know?
Where did you go shopping?
We talked about it and we crammed all of the sightseeing into one day so that we could spend the second day shopping in Seville.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was so
went
fun.
to like Zara and Pull&Bear and Bershka, like all the Spanish
are literally the same exact clothes, but like slightly different. Now I have like this section in my closet that's like a bunch of stuff I bought in Spain that I'm not sure if I'm gonna wear here, but I'm still gonna keep just in case.
You should definitely wear it.
No,
What's your hesitation?
I have to like build up my like I have to be like, hi, I'm the Spanish girl, hi. But that was another favorite memory of mine. I loved just like day-to-day life. I would go for runs or something like that. I was in a karate class there because I do karate. And
yes.
On the very last day, I was like bowed off the mat and they gave me the black belt that I had been wearing because I was borrowing it from someone. And they gave it to me and were like, no, it's a memory. Like, you keep it. And then every single person in the class lined up and kissed me. And I was like, it was so nice to meet you. Like, even people who I'd never really talked to before, it was their first class. They all lined up and kissed me anyway and, like, gave me their emails so I could, like, talk to them and stuff like that. And then I would say my very last favorite memory was technically the year that we, like, completed there. It was our sophomore year of high school, but the way that they do it, it's, like, their last year of middle school, I would say, because they only do 2 years of high school. And so I had like a graduation and they asked me to speak at the graduation. And so I ended up speaking in Spanish and then I translated it into English in front of everyone. And I just said, thank you for my time there. And like, I'd had a lot of fun. But every parent after came up to me and was like, you're incredible. Like, thank you for coming.
Wow.
I was like, thank you. So I would say that was super memorable. All of these parents were taking pictures of me just like by myself. I was kind of sitting there like, hi. Yeah, so I just said, thank you. I talked about my first time meeting all of these people. The first night I got there and I went to school, they all invited me to my friend's house after school. And so I went and his mom was the art teacher of the school. And when I got there, I like barely had talked to any of these people. They just invited me to their house after school one night. I was like, okay, so I went and by the time I got there, they had ordered a bunch of Domino's pizza and like they had no I don't really know how. So they ordered me like my very own cheese pizza and like all of this. And then my host brother called me and he's like, hi, like I'm at McDonald's. Come, my friends want to meet you. And so I was like, guys, like I have to go. And they're like, we're not letting you go by yourself. They all walked me. The 25 of them that were in the apartment walked me to McDonald's. And like when we got there, they all kissed me in front of my host brother. My host brother was sitting there like, what is happening? It was literally more than half of my grade. And they were all just like walking me and like kissing me like, bye, we'll see you on Monday. And he was like, bro, how did you get so many friends? I was like, I don't know half of their names.
That is so sweet.
I talked about that in my speech and I was grateful and that I'm proud of all of them and I'm not going to forget them and stuff like that.
I'm so glad you got to do that. Were you nervous?
I like speaking in front of big crowds. Like I don't remember, like whatever.
It's fine.
Presentation for school and like that was so scary. I like presentations, but doing it in Spanish was so scary. But my English teacher, it was like a presentation in Spanish for my English class.
Mm-hmm.
But my English teacher,
wait, what?
my English teacher really liked me. He liked having me in the class. He like made me do the same presentation like 3 times because we had to do it for different things. And he was like, you have to do it again. You have to do it again. He was like, you're going to overcome this fear of speaking in front of people in Spanish. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you eventually did.
Yeah, I did. It was like a presentation about voting, why it's important to vote because the elections were going on.
Do you remember any excerpt of it?
Gracias por venir.
That's all they need to know.
Yeah, I mean.
Thanks for coming.
No
pressure.
No, I know. It was like,
Yeah. Round of applause, everybody.
That was great.
That was so good.
How did you get to school? Was it by bus?
I walked.
My host mom was a teacher at the school, so she drove us every morning.
I lived 8 minutes speed walking away from my school. I was pretty much late every day. I don't suggest that if you guys are going to do that. I'm also the latest person ever.
A lot of people in Spain are late in general. Like
they were so
my
strict about it at
host
my school.
family was very late to things. I mean, it was hard getting like 5 children out of the house every morning, especially like the 2 younger ones. Every single day, my host brother and I would walk into the class and everyone would just look at us and be like, okay, like it's no big deal. They're always late.
For us, it was a really big deal because like everyone's late to everything in Spain except school. Like school's the thing that's like they have to be on time.
The reason why I brought you here too was not only to hear about your experiences, which are really helpful for other people to listen to, but also because it's unique that both of you are friends and went at the same time, but were placed in different areas. I just want to know overall, like first impressions, was this what you expected it to be going at the same time as your friend?
I didn't have a lot of expectations going together. It was just, I guess we'll talk if we talk. And we did talk. We had some conversations, but we didn't really keep in touch super closely. We kept in touch through like seeing each other's social medias. We probably talked on the phone like 3 times and we texted more than that, but we didn't talk very often. We would just like check in and help each other if we had any like similar issues. Being able to see each other a couple times through the trip, we would catch up a lot during that.
It was helpful to have someone on the same time zone, I'd say, just because I'd wake up, everyone was asleep, I'd go to bed, everyone was awake. So it was nice to have someone on the time zone that I could text at like noon and she'd be awake and she'd answer me in 5 minutes or something. Yeah. I would say that I didn't really have any expectations for going into the trip. I was kind of just like, all right, like we're going together, we're not going to be anywhere close. Like I don't really think we're going to be talking like that much. Like I wouldn't say we were super like attached to each other or anything. Sometimes my parents would text me because they also know Katianna really well. And so they were like, oh, like how's Katianna? And I'd be like, actually, I have no idea. You can text her though. Like I would know. I was like, I think she's doing fine. If she had an issue, I mean, she would text me. So.
Do you mind sharing if you can think of anything that you did want to talk to each other about, or any experiences that you were like, hey, is this happening to you too? Or is this something that's goes on at your school, or is this just me?
Just like school.
Yeah.
Just like I'd be like, oh, do they do this with your grades? Because someone over here
did
absolutely nothing.
We did talk about it. Full experience was
very
dramatically different. So, okay, an important thing to mention here is that going into this, Tess spoke a lot more Spanish than I did. And it's really weird being able to speak like almost everything now. But before, I didn't really speak Spanish. Like, I did not speak Spanish. You could say that. Like, my mom speaks Spanish, but she never spoke to me because my dad doesn't. So I could maybe understand like some very simple things that most people can understand. And then I also had like my classes. Tess has been speaking for a while. So that was like a difference. But going into school, my teachers quickly realized that I had no idea what was going on. And they kind of went really easy on me. And they would give me like individual things for me to do so they could give me a grade in the class. Like I still did everything with the class, but they would maybe say, I'm going to alter this and you just do this section instead of like memorizing all 20 of these people. Like you just memorize these 3 people or something like that. Tess, on the other hand, I mean, we both struggled with the language.
Yeah, no,
the accent is totally different.
Yeah,
so, like,
and I grew up speaking Spanish. Spanish was my first language that I ever learned because I had a nanny that spoke to me in Spanish. Just my accent was completely different. They said I spoke Mexican. That's what they told me when I got there. And I was like, I'm speaking the Spanish I know, the Spanish I'm used to. I don't know. I got there and they were like, okay, well, you understand everything. That's the thing. Like I understood everything. And so when I got there, they just kind of threw me into the class and were like, all right, here you go. This is due tomorrow. And I was doing pretty much exactly what every other kid in my class was doing. I had to take every single test. I had to take every quiz. I was like basically just the same as the kids in my class. The only thing I didn't have to do was in Spanish, the Spanish grammar, they do syntaxes, which is like some way that they put grammar together. And like,
we don't do it in English.
We don't have that in English. I guess it would be the equivalent of like a pronoun and a preposition, but like putting it all into a sentence or something.
And you have to like outline all of it and say like this part of the sentence means this.
Yeah.
You have to like break down
this
the
is
sentence.
Like the objective, and then this is like something else.
This is the like word like
I
the
had
next
I had no idea what was happening. My Spanish language teacher and she was like, all right, like since you don't have this in English and like they've been learning this since they were literally 7 years old, like there's no time for me to teach it, and if you're not coming back to Spain to like test into this, there's no point in you learning it. And so that was the one thing that I didn't have to do, but instead, so all of my tests did not have syntaxes, but they just had more like literature. Basically, I was working twice as hard as everyone else in my class because everyone else was like, oh, this is so hard. And I was like, so it's hard for you in your language. Can you imagine it not being in your language? I would study a lot. Like that's something that I wasn't really expecting. I was like, oh, like I'll go to Spain, like my grades, whatever, blah, blah. I worked way harder than I thought I would, and my ending grades look a lot different than Katianna's did. I ended up passing every single one of my classes, which is super surprising. Yeah. But she passed with 9s and 10s, and I passed with 5s. Yeah. So.
Well, congrats! You both passed.
Yeah, I know. I know. My first like report card, like I don't know what you call it, but like a check-in kind of. So it wasn't a final grade. I had like 3s and 4s and like 2s on some things, and some things I didn't even have a grade in. And my host family was like, it's okay, Tess, like your grades don't really matter. Like just have fun as long as you're learning something. But like me, I was like, no, I have to do this. Like I can't go to Spain and then not pass classes. Like, are you kidding me? So of course, like I started working harder, and they're like, Tess, I don't understand why you're doing this. You could go out with your friends. And I was like, they're all studying too. So it's either I do this or I watch Netflix, and I'm not going to do that.
The amount of Spanish that we understood / spoke going into it made a big difference on our experiences in Spain. We both had amazing experiences, but like for me, not speaking or understanding a lot of Spanish going in made it harder to do a lot of things. It made it harder to make friends even because I couldn't communicate with people. It made it harder to like do school and all of that. It made it harder to like bond with people at first. That wouldn't be necessarily something that I would be scared though. Like if someone else is going into a country where they don't really understand the language, I wouldn't be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't go then, because there was like a couple major turning points for me when it comes to the language while I was in Spain. And the first one was like a month in, where I started understanding a lot of things people said. Everyone was nice to me the whole time, but as soon as I started being able to understand, I could like laugh at people's jokes and like people could see my personality. It took a little longer for me to have like close relationships with friends at school, but it did happen. It just took a little more effort on my part to like learn the language and like really try. And you have to put effort into listening to people because it's super easy to tune it out when you don't understand it. It took a little longer, but by the end, like you can ask Tess every single time we met, like from the first point in Madrid to Seville to Madrid again in the end, like she'll tell you my Spanish was drastically different every single time. Like in the last month of my trip, my Spanish improved so much.
I went from seeing her in Seville to seeing her in Madrid, which is literally 5 or 6 weeks later, and she was barely putting together sentences to literally speaking almost fluently. And I was like, how did you just do that in the last 6 weeks? I've been trying to do that my whole life. Like, I'm kind of confused.
And it also has something to do with It has partly to do with confidence, like not wanting to speak because you're afraid you're going to be wrong, to being like, nobody cares, let me just do it. That's the point that I ended in, being able to speak and not being afraid to do it. So,
what made that change that you were no longer afraid?
I think it was partly just being tired of not being able to talk to people, and like knowing these people feel the same way about English. Like they understand that Spanish is not my first language, and most of them couldn't speak English as well as I could speak Spanish. So like they're not going to judge me. It's not like my first language is Spanish. I think it was just like as I started understanding more, I was just like, I know this is right now, and like I'm able to talk to people, and I want to be able to talk to people. Like part of the reason I came on this trip is to become fluent in another language, and I didn't want that to not happen. It was just kind of something that happened. It wasn't really like I didn't even really notice it until I got back, and like kind of looked over the whole trip and was like, wow, the beginning versus the end is crazy. Like when it comes to language.
That must be really cool to see your progress and really feel it.
Yeah. Especially my family here speaks Spanish.
Are they really impressed?
Yeah, they make fun of my accent.
I'm sure. And so for you, Tess, it was a little bit more immediate, making friends and bonding with your host family and doing things because of the language.
In general, if you're thinking about going to Spain, like people are going to love you no matter what because you're the American. You're different. People want to be your friends. So even if you literally speak nothing of the language, they're still going to be so interested by you. My first day at school, I would look up and I had 10 people staring at me. There was really nothing I did that like stood out, especially on my first day. I was just kind of surprised by that, but they were all super nice to me. I said they invited me to their houses like literally on my first day of school. And then with my host family, so my mom was originally from Scotland. She moved to Spain to teach English in Spain, and she met my host dad, and she fell in love and was like, all right, that's it, I'm moving to Spain. So she actually has an English school in Albacete. We kind of had this deal that was like, if you're confused or like you need something, come to the English school and we'll speak English there together. So like that's where we spoke English, which I didn't really go that often. I went maybe 5 or 6 times my whole time there. I had a couple of classes I had to take there, but besides that, I was like, I would go if I needed help or I needed her to clarify something and I didn't understand what they were saying. But for the most part, I would say like I understood what they were saying mostly in Spanish. It made it easier because they didn't really need to teach me anything. They just needed to converse with me, and I needed to talk. So it was nice when they would like ask me questions and then they would like correct me. My host brother was when it came to like correcting me, he was like, how do you still not know Spanish? Like, come on. And I was like, please leave me alone. You've been speaking English since you were literally 6 months old. Like, stop. Like, he was just coming after me about that. And I was like, Louis, stop. You're just an angsty teenager. The first 2 weeks of me being there, when he would take me around, he wanted to practice his English because he is actually in the U.S. right now. He's studying in Austin for the year. And so, like, he wanted to practice his English, which is pretty good. Like, he's going to do well there. It's fine. So we were kind of just doing that, like doing kind of like a exchange. The hardest part for me with the language was finding my personality, but in Spanish. I knew how to speak, but I knew how to speak kind of like what I was taught in school. I want to say this, but I don't know how to say it test-like. Or I don't want to sound textbook. I want to sound like me.
Like a human being.
Yeah. And so it took me a while to find my personality. And once I did, my friends just weren't used to like this. They called me a circus. They were like, bro, she's crazy. Like, like, why does she like move her face like that? Like, I was like, maybe like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I'm glad you found it though. I think both of you have done this really well, really maturely. And I think that you both supported each other a lot and in different ways. Truthfully, my fear was that you would compare each other's experiences and then not have a good time comparing yourself to the other, just because naturally that's what we do as humans anyway. And then you're so close. But I don't think it sounds like you did that at all.
Everybody's going to have a different experience. Sometimes it was hard for me that I wasn't making as many friends, but not even as many friends as Tess, just as many friends as most people had, you know? But like, I got to that point. It just took me a little bit longer. That was like different, but it wasn't ever like an issue. And then also we have another friend she's like going. So we've both been talking to her a whole bunch and like sharing our experience with her so that she can be prepared and have kind of an idea of what it's going to be like.
Our experience differed so much. Like hers, she's going into a town of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
She is going to be in the middle of nothing.
So it'll be great. Like, no,
it'll be
everybody's
so fun.
gonna know her. Like,
she'll
it's gonna be
La Americana. Just like we
Mhm.
were. The experiences, it was good, and I don't feel like I relied too much on Katianna at all. Honestly, I would say she wasn't even the person I talked to the most. I would say while I was there.
How do you think that your social life now is going to differ after you've had these experiences of hanging out with so many Spanish teenagers and getting into that groove of things, and then now being back in California?
I think Spanish people are so much nicer than Americans. Nobody's mean in Spain, like, especially to us.
I come back and I'm kind of just like, okay, the people I don't want to hang out with, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And the people I'm going to hang out with, I'm going to. I've just stopped kind of caring what other, like, people think about me. I don't know.
I feel like this whole experience, and even maybe, like, just our age in general, like, we're going through a lot of maturing. I feel like, at least for myself, I've stepped away from a lot of the, like, petty social media things, and I'm just like, I'm kind of over that. And being in Spain was a really good chance to kind of disconnect from all of the people and all of the drama. People always talk about, like, FOMO, like the fear of missing out. And I really just kind of stopped caring. I was like, people are still going to be there when I get home. Nobody else gets to do what I'm doing right now. Like, all those people at home, they're living the normal life that they usually live.
Before, when I started telling people I was going to go abroad, they're like, what? You're like, why would you do that? And I was like, because it's going to be fun. Leave me alone. And then when I was there, I was like, all right, I stopped really talking to a lot of people. Not because I wanted to, just because I thought, like, they'll be there when I get back.
Yeah.
It's fine. Like, whatever.
And, like, everybody knew we were having an experience. Like, they didn't, nobody else was mad that we didn't talk to them, because it was just kind of like, they are in a new country doing something super cool. Like, they're doing their own thing right now. And then when they get back, it'll be normal again.
But, like, I also thought nothing's changed. Like, I got back and I was like, so literally nothing's changed. Like, I was even asking, like, what's a big event that happened?
Nobody.
Like, tell me. And
so-and-so broke up.
Right?
Like,
or, like, there's a party. And I was like, all right, that sounds horrible. The cops were called. All right, glad I didn't go to that. Wait, were we in Spain when the shooting happened?
Oh, yeah, we
had a shooting in our town. Of a police officer.
And a police officer died. That was probably.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was a pretty big event. My brother was actually in the In-N-Out that right next to where it happened. And so I remember waking up that next day, like, terrified. Because my brother was like, Tess, like, help. Because I was asleep, but I didn't know where he was. And so he was like, help. And then later he texted me and he was like, I'm okay. Like,
it was so bad.
I just, like, my heart stopped because I was like, that's my little brother. But my best friend who lives right around the corner from me texted me and he goes, just so you know, like, when you wake up, there's going to be a lot of headlines like, don't worry, no one we know died. Like, our school's okay. Your brother's okay. I went to check on him. Just, like, things like that.
A lot of people, when we got back, didn't even know where. They were like, oh, you guys got back from.
Where did you go again? And then also I was gone all summer. So I literally just got back and now people are like, oh, so you've been gone for like what, a year? And I was like, has it really felt like that long? Like, thanks. I don't.
Right.
Oh, you left?
Yeah, I didn't know you left. So I was like, cool. No, I had a lot of people reaching out to me like, this is so cool. How do you do this? Like, stuff like that. And
I have a story. There was a girl from my church before I was gone. She was like, oh, that sounds so cool. I'm really interested in that. So I, like, told her about it. And then she texted me when I got back and she's like, I'm going to Argentina soon. I forgot.
Oh my gosh.
She did it because she had heard that I was doing it.
I just had a lot of people like ask me, oh, how do you do this? And then there's people in my town that also wanted to come to America because they are everyone's so fascinated by America. Yeah. I had a lot of people asking me about that, but everyone there was just concerned with like how expensive it was. They're like, no, it's so much money, like stuff like that. And I was like, but when you think about it, like it's really not whatever. It's just like
everything you do there, like it's
like comparable, but it's just like I was asking my friends, like how much like a rich person in Spain would make a year, and they're like $35,000, and I was like, so people who are making minimum wage don't even make $35,000. Like that's live like
in America
with $35,000 a year. Like that's insane.
Definitely different.
Yeah. And so just to me, it was just kind of like crazy because when I not compare, but when I look at like where we live, I showed my friends like the house I have, like the town I live in. They're like, that's insane.
Yeah.
What is that? How does that make you feel knowing that it's so different, or that you had this experience that's way different than everybody else in your high school?
It's different ways of life. That's how I would explain it to them. I was like, there's just different.
The life we had there was by no means like just getting by. Like both of us had like good lives. Like our families had the money that they needed in that country to live a good life, like not just to be able to eat. Like no, we weren't poor by any means. Like just because maybe in America it would maybe be like that the entire like economy is so different that like that smaller amount of money and like just the way of life, like nobody lives in houses in Spain. They all live in pieces in apartments, and that's not because they're poor. That's just because that's the lifestyle that they have there. People in Spain have way more clothes than I even have here. Like that was one thing my host family like really we had a lot of clothes in our house. That was a really nice thing. I didn't need to buy that many clothes for myself because my host sister and I would share all of our clothes. And so I would wear her things all the time. And then, of course, there were those items that I did buy and did get to bring home.
Is there any future travel already that you're thinking about doing?
I'm hoping to visit my host sister in college in Malaga. Like maybe next year. I mean, it wouldn't be anytime like soon, but like going back to Spain is 100% in my plan. Just need to figure out when.
My brother's planning on studying abroad next year. The goal is to go pick him up. My parents came and picked me up, and then the goal is for me to go and pick him up, and then try and make it a plan to like swing by my old town to like have my family. But my host brother who's here this year, my family wants to go visit him in Austin because Austin's really not that far of a flight and it's not that expensive. I think I'm going to France for spring break, which it's like a long plan we've had for a really long time.
Exciting.
I don't know. I've always said I was going to study abroad in college. I kind of want to go for a year. All of my camp counselors that I got really close to, they've all studied abroad for a year. And well, some of them for 6 months, and they were like, I wish I would have gone for longer. Like, I know I for sure want to study abroad. I don't really know where. I'd love to start learning a third language. I just don't know which one.
Before Spain, I didn't have much of an opportunity to travel, but I've always like really been interested in it. And now going to Spain, I have this like bug and I just want to go everywhere, even if it's just like exploring new things like in California. Like I just want to see new things and experience new things. Studying abroad in college is also something that I'm planning on doing. And again, I don't know how long or where I would go, but it's just such an awesome experience that I would love to be able to do it again. And I would love to be able to just travel to like other countries and see new things, hear new languages, cultures, all of that. It's really intriguing to me.
Well, I hope both of you get to do all of those things and more. There's probably things that you'll think of in the next few years that you would have never even considered too. Is there anything else that you want to share that you think would be important, or have we pretty much covered it?
I was going to say the times that people go out at night was like crazy for me. Going to bed at 10 in Spain is like not enough. Like people don't do it ever.
I was eating dinner at 11:30.
Yeah,
every
night.
That's
a little late for Spain, but like that's still within the like normal threshold of eating dinner. Like I would eat dinner at like 10:30 too. So people are way more on like the night life than here, but it's nothing to be like scared of. I even like kind of like the eating schedule in Spain more than I do here.
Yeah, I just remember like I went to a family dinner and we were out till 1 a.m.
Yeah.
It's so different. They were like, yeah, like this is normal.
I actually thought of one last question I wanted to ask you. Can each of you share your favorite word or Spanish slang that you learned, or something that you taught the other?
In my town, we have like something that people don't say except in this part of Spain.
Okay.
So everybody says like tío for like, oh, tío this, tío that. But my town would say acho. It comes from the word muchacho. And so people would be like, acho, tío. And it would be like getting your attention like, hey, dude, like something like that. And people said acho all the time. And it was only in like my part of Extremadura, my part of Spain. And like when I went to Seville, my coordinator was like, oh, you live in Extremadura. People say acho there. And Tess is like, what is acho? So other people know like that they say that, but nobody else says it. So that was an interesting slang that I liked. Acho.
I love that. I've never heard of that either. So thank you.
I mean, this is like, I don't know, basic, but everyone says vale there, and I just loved it. I was like, vale.
When I actually remember when Tess and I first arrived in the Madrid airport, we went and got a water from this little like store, and we were like, oh, like in Spanish, can we please have a water? And she was like, vale. And Tess and I both looked at each other because that was like our first time hearing it, and we were expecting it because people had told us like we're gonna say this. So we were both just like, oh my gosh,
I was like
they
oh my
said
God, I'm back. I remember it so fondly from the last time I was there, and I was just like, oh.
Oh, wait, last question. I remember, Tess, you specifically said when we were doing the pre-departure that you had so many things on your Pinterest board about studying abroad.
Oh, I have my.
Oh, that was you?
Yeah, we have so many Pinterest boards. We're like,
Did they end up helping you, or did you come up with better advice for yourself?
I mean, a lot of it was like stuff to bring, and I would for sure say I overpacked. Like it's like a thing. Like you're gonna buy stuff when you go there. Yeah. So like maybe don't bring 2 gigantic suitcases and a backpack and a pillow, because like that was a lot.
Mm.
But maybe like I don't know. Like I ended up having to. We ended up having.
She was like 20 pounds over. Like it was bad.
Oh.
So she packed a duffel bag.
I packed a duffel bag like knowing that I was gonna like buy stuff, but like not that much. And so it was like
we stuffed like 10, 15 pounds of clothes
into this duffel bag.
But like
literally that.
It was but then
here to the airport. Her with one, me with the other, so we're like walking through the airport.
Madrid airport.
Like idiots.
The Madrid airport is the worst airport.
It's the worst airport. Like literally, I hate the Madrid airport. It's so bad. You walk so far.
Yeah.
So we were like walking through the airport with this bag and my gigantic pillow and my backpack and her backpack and her guitar.
Yeah, my guitar.
She brought her guitar, by the way.
I took the
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And so we're just like walking through the airport like this, and people are like, "What is happening?" Then they're like, "We need your passports," and we're like, all my clothes got back safe. Don't worry. Thanks to everyone who's concerned. We're all fine.
You both have had such fun experiences, and I'm so happy for you. And I'm so happy that you want to share them with other people. So really, thank you so much for taking the time to explain everything and share these things.
We're actually, this year at our school, we're going to start a study abroad club.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
We just want to like encourage kids to study abroad and like help that process, because I know a lot of people are interested about it, but they just don't have like the support system or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right.
So many people have asked me questions about studying abroad. So many people are like, how do you do this?
Oh, well, wonderful. I'm so glad I got to talk to you. We'll have a great last afternoon and next day off before you start the big rush of junior year. And good luck.
Thank you.
Spanish class will be a breeze.
Yeah, I know.